Hello, welcome. I'm Judith Pentz, and we're here having a masterclass series on overwhelm to resilience, thriving naturally at midlife and beyond. The important thing here is for all of us to be aware of all that's possible for women over 40. And the reason I wanted to do this is I know that many women of all ages, but especially as we age, don't find enough time for self-care. And there's many, many ways to help support you. I know that the people I've lined up, the speakers, will have amazing and quick ways for you to take care of yourself in the moment on a day-to-day basis so that by the end of that first presentation, you'll have tools that you know you can manage within your day. So why did I want to do this? I know because I've had my similar challenges in terms of self-care through the years, and I have found many ways to help support myself and the people, the individuals that I've worked. I'm an integrative psychiatrist with a focus on health coaching at this point in time, wanting to help people with these particular challenges, especially women of a certain age. So, what I'd like to do is now introduce to you Leslie Korn, Dr. Korn. Dr. Korn is a longtime friend who's been a master in many areas when it comes to self-care and nutrition and mental health. She also has 10 books authored in her name. One of my favorites happened to be a book on the art of cooking. This cookbook called The Good Mood Kitchen is one of my favorites because it really helps you with the basics that you need in the pantry so that it's a wholesome meal that you're creating and not necessarily full of the different products that are available that don't support one's well-being. The other part that I really enjoy is with her master herbalist skills, she brings in the herbs that are very helpful in teaching you how to use the herbs to help balance the brain and the body and allowing for support of one's well-being and mental health. So, Leslie, how are you today?
I'm great, Judith. How are you? Thank
I
you.
am great. And I want to thank you for being able to join me today. And I'm looking forward to our conversation because you have a wealth of wisdom and experience under your belt. How,
Well, I always enjoy spending time with you, Judith.
thank you. So would you like to add a little bit in terms of what I had shared about your background? Because I know that that was like the tip of the iceberg of what you have to offer.
Well, in keeping with today's theme, I would say that I've learned a great deal about how to work with my clients by using myself as a laboratory. I don't think we can separate out who we are personally from who we are professionally. And as you well know, I arrived in the jungle many, many years ago in the jungle of Mexico and got sick with absolutely everything possible. And that was coming off of a very stressful childhood. And so I spent many years practicing self-care. And I had no idea it would turn into a career, but it did. And then I did my conventional training. But I have to say that even today, I learn a great deal from enacting my own self-care, really how hard it is to do it
Okay.
and what the challenges are, because it gives me so much insight into what gets in our way, what the obstacles are. So that's a little bit about me.
Well, that's actually very well said. And I ended up writing my book with that idea in mind because the journey of my own self-healing through Panchakarma and Ayurveda really opened my eyes to what's possible and realizing that that's information that could be of value to other people as well, including women, of a certain age. So all right, well, let's talk about what would be some of the first steps needing to improve one's mental health, depending on the age. Because I know with each decade, especially after 40, there's lots of change that happens in our body and our mind. And what would you suggest that might be a useful approach?
You know, I in developing the Rainbow Blueprint, I developed 17 different approaches to self-care because the real key is what will we actually do, not what someone tells us we should do.
Mhm.
But what will we actually do? Like if someone told me to go play golf, I'm just not going to do that. And so I think the first thing is to really key into what do I love enough that I'll spend time doing it and I can make it work for me, that I can make it work for my self-care. Right now, I'm into sleep. I am really passionate about making sure I go to bed before 11 p.m., which is the ideal time to sleep for our circadian rhythm, and to be in resonance with the earth and with the sun and the moon. And so that's what I'm doing. And I'm making sure I'm doing that so my glymphatic system in the brain is going to discharge waste. And then I am making sure I'm staying in bed until a good 8 hours has passed. And when I wake up, I've been really enjoying doing the 4-7-8 breath because not only for me, we've come through COVID, now we're into lots of anxiety around the state of the world and the state of the earth. And I find that my patients, my clients are really stressed out and anxious. So I try to begin every morning by breathing in and holding my breath and breathing out. And I love breath holding. I love what it does to our blood gases. It automatically, physiologically reduces anxiety. And so that's a little bit of my current evening to morning routine, Judith. And then I'm into muscle. I think muscle is our key to a good mood. So I'm really jazzed by lifting weights and working with stretchy bands and having my trainer put me through my paces, even if I groan and moan through it and resist and say no more. I'm really loving building muscle with weights and eating lots of protein. So that kind of encapsulates my current approach to self-care.
Well, and each of them that you just shared are pretty amazing in terms of how they offer support in the moment, but also then supports all day long and into the future with all the steps that you're taking. Muscle breakdown really starts in our 30s and 40s. And so whatever you can do to preserve that is really, really of great value. And sleep, yes, that is the most precious gift that we can give to our human body and brain. I totally agree. And before 11 is ideal, as you said, because that cleaning, that house cleaning that needs to happen, somehow it's happening right then and there where everything kind of shuts down and there's enough of, movement in there that room in there, I should say, where there that cranial sacral fluid can do a little washing and then rinsing. So wonderful stuff. Wonderful stuff. What would be some of the barriers for these first steps that you just mentioned?
Um, I think they can vary, certainly. I
Mhm.
know I've certainly experienced the barrier of not letting myself go to sleep early. I've
Mhm.
got work to do, or I've got things to catch up on.
Right.
I think we have a lot of social pressure to sleep less. I see people really bragging about how little sleep they need. So I think societally, one of our obstacles is letting go of what the fads are or what the general discourse is. And I think we really have to nourish ourselves as women in what we intuitively know is right for us. And so I think that can be a barrier to sleep. Um, and I think one of the barriers that I see a great deal of in my clients is finding time to exercise. And I always say that is my sacred hour every day. I'm setting that hour. I'm not letting nothing interfere with it. I'm not making an appointment. I'm
Mm,
not taking any calls. No matter what, I am not letting anything interfere with that. And so I think we have to get very rigorous with ourselves and tap into the deservedness that we have to adhere to a very simple schedule. It needn't be complex, but if we carve out a little bit of us time, I
mhm,
think we can allow a lot more flexibility as the day goes on.
mhm.
Those are, I think, a few of the obstacles I think of, which are more the emotional or the belief obstacles rather than, let's say, the physical obstacles. I think we could talk about some of the significant medical or emotional obstacles like insomnia
Mhm.
or staying asleep. And I think I do a lot of work with women in my practice around do they have sleep latency issues? Are they able to fall asleep or stay asleep? And when we think about perimenopause and menopause, that's when sleep starts to get a little rocky.
Right.
And I am a big fan of bioidentical hormones and progesterone for women if sleep starts to get a little rocky. So I think we could kind of look at our obstacles or what gets in the way of carrying out and being successful in these methods.
Mhm. I agree. And so you're actually pointing out that there's psychological issues, but there could be biochemical issues that happen with perimenopause and menopause. And I totally agree. I agree with progesterone in particular in really supporting sleep. And then also looking at lifestyle issues too. And that can all be obviously be a whole nother conversation right there to help support sleep. And the intention, like you said, about self-care and creating a sacred hour. It sounds like you've also created the sacred hour of 11 o'clock, being that time I take care of myself and I shut everything down and I go and honor what my body and my brain need at this time of night. So
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
that's amazing, and I appreciate you sharing that. So, and I think you've already addressed this question a little bit, but how can we implement these changes that you're suggesting beyond some of the things that you've mentioned? Um, I think one thing that you may have referenced is maybe seeing a practitioner that has a holistic perspective, but also from my perspective. I appreciate the allopathic perspective as well. I kind of work in both worlds in that regard, and so having a baseline in terms of blood work and the physical, that type of thing, some screenings in terms of breast health, that type of thing. All that I think is really important. The bone density, but then there's many options. It doesn't have to be necessarily one path to help support the mind and body when it comes to the different challenges with sleep or with exercise or whatever the health issue might be.
Yeah, I think all of it really is valuable. It gets put together in a way in which we can prioritize what's going on, what are the symptoms, what's getting in the way of feeling good. One of the areas that I also focus on, and especially related to sleep, is the dependence that many, many women have on pharmaceuticals for sleep, things like Ambien or even
Right.
goddess forbid, benzodiazepines. And so I do, or I've got a lot of women who've been prescribed Seroquel as a sleep aid,
Really?
especially when they are yes, when they are especially dealing with the symptoms of complex trauma and PTSD, and they're on other medications that are too stimulating. And it's a nasty drug as far as I'm concerned. And it takes a lot to help women get off of it.
Mhm.
So I'm a real believer in either staying off pharmaceuticals. I think if we look at the range, you've raised the issue of allopathic medicine. If we look at a lot of the pharmacy that we have options to use. I think the options for sleep in pharmacy are about the worst. I think there are great options for cardiac health and for all kinds of things, pain like broken bones, but I think we've got to work on natural approaches to aiding sleep because, we know that Ambien is processed very, very slowly by women in contrast to men. And we see higher rates of car accidents in the morning because women don't realize that they're still under the influence of Ambien many hours later. And so in what I do is I do a lot of testing. I do pharmacogenomic testing as a way to bring insight into what pharmaceuticals will you respond to beneficially and what should you stay away from. And then we begin by looking at some of the simpler approaches, like maybe there's an herb or an herb combination like valerian, hops, and passion flower, which target the GABA receptors, which help you relax. But maybe that's not enough. Maybe you need something like lactium, which is a biopeptide extract from casein, the milk protein. It's what puts babies to sleep.
Right.
Or maybe, and I know this is one of your favorites too, a lavender extract, silexin.
Mhm.
So I work really when I'm working clinically with women to really think through what do you want? What's going to work for you? Are you an herb person or you want some nutrients or even let's go back to exercise. We know that hard exercise early in the day
Right.
before 3 p.m. really aids sleep at night. So, really working to see what's going to work for you, and then get even down to the minutia of not only what works for you, but what's the form that will work for you? Do you want to have a liquid tea? Do you want to have a capsule? Do you want to take an herbal tincture? So we really do a lot of work of getting in touch. What do I need? Because after all, we're often not asked that question, and we often don't allow ourselves to get in touch deeply. What do I need?
Right. And what will work for me? And am I listening to my body when I am exposed to this or that? Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. And certainly women often don't have the exposure to practitioners like the way that you work, where people really listen and really listen to a history and listen to the stories to really put together that puzzle and honor what it is our clients need.
Right. It's making me think that we haven't talked too much about nutrition, and I would like to touch on it. I know that it's, a huge topic, but um, in terms of, especially for women as they're entering midlife and beyond, what thoughts do you have about the choices of food and how woman maybe needs to make some changes where the stuff that she could maybe eat and get away with in her 20s and 30s? Something's happening, obviously, in the 40s. The metabolism is slowing down. Other shifts are happening. The way you responded to exercise might change too. So
Yeah.
all those things are happening. So what are your thoughts about the power of nutrition in terms of helping support mental health and sense of well-being and reducing mental health symptoms too?
Absolutely. I think it's the key. I think it's the missing link in
Mhm.
current mental health care. I have a saying, and it goes, nutrition is biology, not ideology. And we're flooded so much with the latest ideas about what nutrition should be. And again, I think it has to be very individualized. Some women will thrive on a vegetarian diet. Some women will thrive on a carnivorous diet or a keto diet. And so there's no one right diet for every woman. And the quickest way to discover if you're on the right diet is how you feel. If you're feeling great, energized, you're sleeping well, your mood is up, then it's likely you're on the right diet. But if you're not, then that diet will benefit from being tweaked. Now, I have in my own work very few absolute no's. And by and large, I think refined sugar is our poison. It's our medication and it's our poison. That doesn't mean that you can't have a birthday cake a couple of times a year. It's not going to do you in. It's that relentless daily grabbing something with sugar or that empty inflammatory process, because that's what happens as we age. We begin to get all of the aches and pains from inflammation, and it's exacerbated by, let's say, sugar.
Mhm.
So I try to encourage women to reduce sugar. And the key to reducing sugar in us, which after all stimulates dopamine, we gravitate to sugar because we need some kind of medication assist. But the alternative is really a high protein, moderate fat diet for at least a week or two to detox from sugar. We have to detox, just like any drug, we have to come off of it. And then we can balance out whatever it is we're having. But when even myself, if I feel that I start to crave sugar or crave sweet, I'll ask myself, have I been eating enough protein?
Mm.
Because there's a relationship between eating enough protein and craving sugar. And so I work with women to just really take a week or two, just blast your body with protein and good fats,
Mhm.
and of course your vegetables and fruits. And you can get that sweet satisfaction from your fruits or from your root vegetables
Right.
in particular. And you know, as an Ayurvedic practitioner, that we value the root vegetables in Ayurveda because they ground us to the earth. They
Right.
help us feel grounded in ourselves. And so I really encourage a lot of root vegetables with some nice raw butter. So that's a little bit about nutrition, just identifying what it is that makes you feel good. And are you vegetarian? Are you kind of a mixed person? Or do you really thrive on a lot of animal protein and good and lots?
Yes, and what I hear you saying, and I think you said it incredibly well, is modifying the diet is about you understanding yourself and what your body's needing at this point, as opposed to the latest fad that's being touted on TikTok or wherever. Um, I wanted to mention about the carrots. Carrots have the innate sweetness, and I have in the last few years, I've always looked for carrots with carrot tops.
Oh, yes.
The freshness that comes with a carrot that's still attached to a carrot top from the grocery store is loads different than whatever you buy in a plastic bag. And I actually recently shared that with my grandson, and he's like, "Gosh, carrots have a whole different flavor at your house." And I said, "It's not my house; it's the carrot top."
That's so true. I love it. And I love when I see those colored carrots and how they taper. You know they're sweet. And then, I've made pesto out of those carrot tops.
Uh-huh.
And it's a wonderful alternative to basil. And I'll make pesto and I'll add walnuts, so good for the brain, or olive oil, garlic. What could be better? And then I'll freeze it because back to our time, we often don't feel like we've got the time to cook. And so I love to keep pesto, whether it's basil or carrot tops, in the freezer. And let's say I've really had a busy day, I'm tired. I might put some rice noodles on, or I might put some veggies on to steam. And then I can pull out that frozen pesto and put it on top. And it makes a very rich, delicious meal that's deeply satisfying. And I think that's the other key. We need to be satisfied,
Mhm.
deeply nourished and satisfied.
Right. No, it's very true. From an Ayurvedic perspective, they really want you to consider home cooking as much as possible, because the essence of your being and the love that you have for those that you're caring for or for yourself gets imbued into the food. And then, so there's a second level of nourishment that is, more of a spiritual, but yet equally powerful in terms of sharing that abundance, that's happening when you cook your own meals. So I just wanted to
I
mention
love
that
that.
because we, as a culture, are cooking less and less in many ways. I know we had a slight uptick with more cooking during COVID, but I think we've kind of gone back to, the fast food approach. And I always try to find something positive with the fast food. Is there an opportunity for a vegetable to be a part of that whole picture? And have less of that fast food, because the research actually does show that if you do add vegetables and fruit and don't change anything else, that the mental health of that person actually will improve. And over time, the taste buds actually change too. And it's harder to eat as much of that processed food or fast food because of it. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. You're talking about cooking makes me think of that wonderful book like Water for Chocolate,
right.
and how we stir in the love into the food, and then we're sharing that and nourishing ourselves. And that's another strategy I'll use is there's so much onus on us as individuals in our society. We've gotten so far away from the collective. And we shouldn't be cooking and eating alone. We should be cooking and eating with other people. And so I encourage people to connect with others or set up potlucks or go to cooking classes. Or one of the ways that I love to cook is using a crock pot too, because especially if you never learned how to cook, it's fail-safe cooking. You can't go wrong throwing some chicken and vegetables and a little white wine into a crock pot, or beans. And I love making Boston baked beans in a crock pot with molasses. You get a little bit of that sweetness, but you get your B vitamins. And so I really encourage exploring that in terms of ritual. And I think we miss so much of ritual in our lives. We really want to return there.
I agree. In terms of community, the going back to the Catholic Church here recently because of Easter, and my family is attending in that particular church that I really enjoy going to. My grandson's in the parochial school, and there is a nice sense of connectiveness there and connection with the people that, see each other almost daily with their kids in school, and a sense of camaraderie that you don't necessarily have as easily in other settings. So I do see the value of that connectivity and the importance of it as how you're describing it. And since COVID, I think it's kind of a mix. There are those who have tried to create more community and those who have chosen not to. And it is, as you know, it's a national challenge, at least here in the US, where people are living more alone and are more lonely, especially as they age. And so what you're describing is really of great value, because social connectiveness is another way to help support well-being and help a woman thrive, through the years.
Absolutely. I wanted to just comment on what you were saying about fast food, because I think one of the biggest problems with fast food is the oils that are
I
used
agree.
in fast food. And if we were going to pick just a couple of changes to make in our lives first that aren't really, I don't think they're too difficult. I've never had anyone say to me, Dr. Korn, don't make me eat butter, please. No, people are very happy to know that butter or virgin olive oil would be much better for them than safflower or canola or corn oil. The problem with eating out and fast food too often, what could we say once a week, a few times a month, is that the oils that they use are very inflammatory
Right.
to our arteries. And what goes on in our heart arteries goes on in our brain. And
Exactly.
so this makes us very vulnerable as women. Heart disease is still the major cause of death in women. And
Mhm.
so I always suggest think about it as a treat, not as a
Go
way
to.
of life,
Right.
and to begin to look at the couple of things that you can do, reduce the sugar or change the type of sweet that you're having. If you're still really craving sweet, you can add a little raw honey to your carrots, and start to, as you say, retune those taste buds because we're so overwhelmed by the stress of daily life in our brain and our mind. So are our taste buds overwhelmed by all of these unnatural tastes that make us then think, oh, that doesn't taste like much to me. But it's because we're overwhelmed by these very strong and potent unnatural chemicals that are designed to create addiction.
I agree. Last year, one of the trainees, I teach an elective at the University of New Mexico, and they all are assigned to pick a topic from different exposures that they had through the year, but or any integrative topic of interest to them. And one woman spoke about the science behind many food manufacturers and finding the right chemistry to create an addictive quality of the foods. And it was actually pretty appalling the amount of research that goes into the process because obviously there's money to be made in this instance too. So, um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and speaking of that, one of the things I do when I'm working with people with a lot of lability, there's a lot of research that shows that these artificial sweeteners are very, very bad for the brain, that they really trigger, especially the research has been with people with mood disorders. But I think we could see it in children and adults with attention issues as well. So I think it's not just overwhelming. I think it's bad for the brain. I think, I always say, did Mother Nature put this package on a tree and ask you to go pick it up, pick it and eat it? No.
No, I wanted to actually comment on the fat because it's the trans fats, which is actually an artificial fat that's been manufactured, that is the real culprit here. If the company, the restaurant is actually using a different oil, there's a bit of a less risk involved in terms of the inflammation process. So, but that said, there's still significant concerns. Um, I wanted to actually take a moment and talk about trauma and speak to that because um, we're coming now, I think, into our culture where people are more familiar with the concept and that it needs to be addressed. But then there are many who still don't see the challenge around that. And wanted to see if you would have any comment around that, because I find that it's a really important, um, especially for women who often can be the recipient of trauma, but then told that it's not, they don't need to worry about it. It's not, whatever happened was their problem. And it's handled in a way that they are basically told there's nothing they can do about it and remain a victim. And I know you've done a lot of work in this area, and it is part of the intervention that you might often work with when you're discussing things with the people that you're seeing. I know it's a big topic, but just a few comments on that I think would be lovely.
Yes, I think it underlies much of our mental distress, the experience of trauma, the
Hmm.
experience in childhood, what we call the ACEs,
Hmm.
adverse
Right.
childhood events. I think of it as any experience or series of experiences that are overwhelming
Hmm.
in nature.
Hmm.
And we know that the persistent exposure to these overwhelming experiences really have deleterious effects on our nervous system, on our immune system. And when we look at some of our chronic health problems, and that's who I work with, are mainly women with chronic physical and mental health challenges. It is always, always related to trauma,
Right.
always. And if you look at the percentage of association, autoimmune disease, chronic migraines, IBS, IBD, um, pain, the addictions, we're looking at easily 70% association with experience of whether adverse events in childhood, interpersonal trauma, rape, um, sexual assault as teens, or as adults, growing up in instability and neglect. We know that neglect can have as serious effects as other kinds of trauma. So I'm glad that we continue to move in the right direction. I don't think we've done enough yet, let alone
Mm-mm.
the trauma of migration, the
Right.
trauma of refugees. So we've got a lot of trauma. And men are subject to a lot of traumatic exposure too.
Yes.
Um, and we've got a lot of silence still
Mhm.
around trauma. For example, I know that public health uh, in the past, public health initiatives have wanted primary care practitioners to really open up that door and speak to the exposure to traumas affecting people's lives. And yet, there's been a lot of resistance because there's often not a lot of support. Then, what do you do when you open up that keg of Pandora's box, let's say, and you open that up? So I think that's where mental health support comes in, or I think a lot of times women are seeking help physical problems and chronic pain. They're given medications. I think we've got a really over-medicated society. I think we've got huge numbers of women on antidepressants, and they have all the right reasons to feel depressed, but I'm not sure the medications do anything but suppress the need to really let that trauma come to the surface and have a good ear and exchange and figure out what is that story about? What is the story of my trauma or my traumas? And what does it mean? I think ultimately we've got to make sense of what's happened to us, make meaning of it, and do it in community, do it with other women in a group, do it with a compassionate psychiatrist or therapist.
Mhm.
And it takes years. It's not an overnight thing. And I think in our days of let's get this all taken care of really quickly, that doesn't work either. So I think it's really important for us to honor what we went through in our lives and find a professional guide to walk that path of discovery.
I know here in the States, we're starting to work more with peer counselors as being a part of the fabric of the mental health field, including more of an inpatient or intensive outpatient setting. And that I think is a bridge of sorts in terms of similar to like the AA approach, where there can be a sponsor, so to speak. It's not quite like a sponsor, but there is that connectivity and understanding at a human level, some of the steps that it takes to get past a certain point within the trauma spectrum. I was just listening to a program on the radio, and there was this, and it was in one of the African countries. I do apologize, I don't remember which one. And one of the things that the psychiatrist said, there was like one psychiatrist for like every, no, 30,000, 40,000 people. And what his premise has been is to actually gather the grandmothers in the community and work with them to be present and supportive of those in their communities from that peer but also wise person perspective. And it's not the answer per se, but it is a step in the direction of saying community can be a part of this process while they are seeking help at different levels of care. And but it's a journey, exactly what you're saying. And sometimes when you think you've kind of sorted out what that issue is, there's a shift in your own personality or in terms of your own evolution as a human being, and there can be new things that come up from the very thing that you thought you had taken care of. Because I know I've had that experience in my own life. So I totally agree that it is a journey, and I support what you're saying about one, needing to be recognized, and two, really being present with it in a way that's much more supportive. I do know that there's an attempt with primary care here in the States to do some of the things and then embedding psychologists or psychiatrists in that setting to allow for that fluidity that needs to happen for referrals rather than what's happening, because right now it's very siloed here in the United States. Um, and that said, I do feel like there's opportunities, at least with like online intervention, that can at least start the process for people in a way that is maybe the beginning steps of supporting people, with different levels of trauma that need support.
Yeah, I love the peer approach, peer support approach, because these are generally peers, people who have gone through trauma and have reached a level of resolution where they are now giving back. And I think that's so important to find a way to channel what it is we learn through our own suffering.
Right.
And especially now, today, where people are feeling so helpless with the trauma that's going on in the United States and the trauma of how people are being treated, that the only antidote to that is action. The only way we overcome that sense of I'm out of control, I have no control,
Right.
is to find a way to feel like we take some modicum of control. And that's often getting together with others. It could be helping others, it could be volunteering, it could be taking some kind of action. Now, oftentimes that's a little bit later stage of recovery and trauma. Sometimes we just need to be held, either literally or figuratively,
Mhm.
by a peer, by a therapist. But at some point, we transition through the stage where we do feel like, all right, I've learned enough. I'm going to pay it forward, as they say, and
Right.
help someone else.
Right.
And I think that's an essential ingredient to our work as wise women, as aging women,
Mhm.
who, as you say, you can think you've resolved all this, and then boom, retirement hits,
Mhm.
and that be kind of a traumatic event or a life-shifting event, and things start to bubble up again, or maybe someone dies, and grief triggers um, those memories and those insecurities, and or as we face medical trauma, it can trigger other kinds of old traumas that get re-stimulated. And so I think particularly as we age, we want to have others around us, our friends, family, if that's possible, but also a community
Mhm.
of people that understand compassionately how to support us.
Right. I know for myself personally, it was the loss of my mother in 2018 that ended up really making me step back and look at some issues, like I said, that I thought I had resolved at one point, and realized that there was much deeper work to be done. It was very humbling, yet I know I grew a lot from that experience, and have appreciated the learning that happened with it, even though it was uncomfortable quite often. Yes.
Yeah, our work is never done, really. It,
Right, right.
it really is.
Yeah. So one of the things I know that you do is you come from a place of holistic approach. And how do you best decide where to start? Do you have a protocol that you consider? And what would be, just a little bit of information around that could be useful for people to understand if they seek out, an integrative therapist.
I really begin with my client's complaint that
Mhm.
they want to address and resolve. I really want to understand where their discomfort and distress is, and I want to be able to respond to that first
Mhm.
and to help them feel comfortable first. I was thinking about when we were talking about nutrition, I was thinking about someone I was working with recently who'd seen dozens of functional medicine practitioners and was still suffering a great deal. And when she started telling me her history, I asked her some questions about her symptoms and her nutrition. And some of the things that she was saying was she was always hungry and that she was never satisfied and that she craved sugar and she couldn't gain weight.
Hmm.
And I started thinking, and she was extremely anxious as well. And she cycled on and off a lot of psychotropic medications. And for me, that was, um, I kind of sifted it through my metabolic knowledge. And that's actually a sign and a symptom of someone, a more unusual metabolic type, meaning they have a particular need for a lot of purines in their diet
Hmm.
because this kind of type is a very rapid metabolizer, even if, they're 50 years old.
Hmm.
And the purines slow down that metabolism. And as soon as we added purines into her diet, and as I say, who you wouldn't necessarily think of it, except it was a piece of my background and training.
Hmm.
As soon as we were able to supplement her diet with a lot more purines, 30% of her diet with purine foods, um, everything started to shift. And this lifelong distress started to shift.
Wow.
That's just one example of
Hmm.
really listening to distress. And, I'm an old psychodynamic therapist, so
Hmm.
I really want to listen to my client's story and put the pieces of the puzzle together with them. And so you've already named our siloed medical society. And I think the greatest gift we can give to a client is listen to the physical, listen to the emotional, and even spiritual if that's important to them, because it's all related. And I think the biggest failure we're trying to fix right now in our delivery of care is that people don't often access to someone who help them see themselves as a physical, emotional, mental, spiritual being, and that those pieces come together, that the physical side has that relationship to emotional distress. We just need to sort that out. So think of myself as a detective. It's my most favorite part of my work is really figuring out how those pieces of that jigsaw puzzle all fit together and then finding the modalities. Like I'm a cranial sacral therapist, and maybe for some people it means sacral work, or maybe for someone with IBS, it means visceral manipulation and deeply relaxing the gut through loving, healing, therapeutic touch. Maybe we go off on the food stuff, which can be so fraught
Yeah.
for people who've suffered with food. So I think that's really my approach, so individual and connecting with what someone needs and helping them define that and doing my best to respond to that.
That's really well said. And it actually was one of my last questions for you was, do you take a team approach? I know I do. And I have my, you know, healers in the community that I connect with and refer to. And it has made a huge difference. I mean, there's one woman who has a complex trauma history who did need some psychotropics, but was very, very attuned to the nutrients that she needed and noticed the difference. And with some somatic emotional work and some EMDR, she has moved through a whole new level of being aware and being awake in a more comfortable way with her beingness. And but it took a team to make that all happen. It wasn't just me, it was the therapist, it was the body worker, and a combination thereof. And, a willingness for both the husband and the wife to be present with each other and do their own work with each other and separate. that some healing happened in a very magical way. Took time, but they're actually in a new place now of having a deeper relationship as a couple, in a way that neither of them had ever anticipated. So when you see the beauty of something like that coming together, you understand the value of having a team approach, to really cover all these different territories, the mental, emotional, physical, and the spiritual if need be,
Yeah. You point out an important ingredient, which is time.
hmm
At time and patience, that we don't become ill overnight generally. And if we do, it's usually quite fixable with
Right.
antibiotics or something like
Right.
that. It's acute. But these kinds of chronic mental or physical illnesses really need time. So I'm always reinforcing that we can be patient.
Mhm.
It may take a year or 2 or 3 years, but a lifetime of distress, we have the opportunity to turn it around.
Right.
And I see this over and over again. It takes time. People feel a lot of pressure to all done right away.
Mhm.
But I think that's the greatest gift we can give ourselves is to take the time that we need to restore our well-being and to explore ourselves and who we are, because so much of the time trauma intersects our authentic self. It cuts off a branch of our development or who we are or what our path was. And oftentimes we need that time to rediscover who I am or who I am now as a result of those experiences and path am I meant to be on now? And that takes time and gentleness.
Right. And a little bit of grace, as I mentioned at the very beginning, is really allowing that space and being present, is one of the most amazing gifts one can give oneself in the healing journey. So we're coming to a close here. Are there any last comments that you would like to make? And also, if you have a free gift to discuss, or what you were going to offer. If not, we can arrange for another time, for a little video chat around that.
I do. I've got a wonderful little PDF cookbook for trauma. And it's got some herbs, it's got some easy to make recipes, and I can make that available to you. Beautifully designed. So it'll be a lot of fun and it's easy to read online or on your phone. And gee, how do I want to finish this? I think um, really staying in touch with um, our deepest needs and taking the time to identify those. I'm a big believer in the nourishment associated with culture and cultural exposure
Mhm.
and nature. And I think so much we learn from our own cultural identities, but also other cultural identities and being out in nature and aligning ourselves with the rhythms of nature. And so I think we didn't have a chance to go into that too deeply, but I think that's a piece that we want to embrace as well.
I agree. In fact, before our interview was out, I have converted a fountain into a water garden, and everything is starting to, come up and bloom, and the first roses are blooming around it too. And just sitting there for a moment was incredibly supportive and grounding for me. Bringing nature back, and sitting with nature really helps to ground us and to connect with Mother Earth. We are of Mother Earth, and we return back to the earth when we pass. So, having connection with the elements happens in nature so easily and is so refreshing and grounding for us. So thank you for bringing that up. Dr. Leslie Korn, I am so pleased with our time and our sharing today. It was very exciting and very fun to have this exchange. I've always valued our time together, and I'm hoping, listeners, that you've enjoyed it as much as I have today. I look forward to hearing questions that you might have from this interview, and there may be an opportunity for us to gather at some point the different speakers to actually have a question and answer if there's an interest in doing that. And don't forget to listen to the other interviews. We've got nutrition and nutrients that will be covered by a PhD researcher who has done a lot of work in the field of nutrients and mental health. We also have lifestyle changes that can be personalized through looking at Ayurveda. And we have a sleep doctor who will talk about different tools that can be used in the home setting, and much, much more. So do join us, and I really welcome our time together. Thank you so much.
Oh,
I really,
pleasure.
yes,
Thank you so much.
thank you. And I will stop recording here.